kind of looking at the world and the workflow and everything that's going on right now as not as something that we're waiting to get back to the way it was, but something that we're looking at being proactive and coming up with solutions that are going to help guide us through a new world and a new way of working that is going to be safer and is going to be more productive and effective for all of us going forward.
Yeah, and the new world has no vowels, so that's also why they're gone from the normal.
That's right. Yeah.
So I guess introduce our speakers. So I'll introduce Mandeep first, and then Brad, if you'd want to introduce Sarah as well.
Yep.
So I see many of the names on the call already definitely know Mandeep. Mandeep Malik is an associate professor of marketing at the DeGroote School of Business at McMaster University. So he teaches case-based courses in the undergrad and MBA programs and has extensive experience in strategy consulting, brand marketing, and executive training. He has challenged existing patterns and built innovative affiliations with the industry to launch unique experiential programs to change marketing education. I know some of the familiar names I see on the call too have also participated in a number of those programs. I know two of those specifically being, among others, the Mars Apprentice Program and Canada's Next Top Ad Exec. And so welcome, Mandeep.
Thank you for having me.
And Brad.
All right, so I'm going to introduce our next panelist, who is Sarah Hopen. Sarah is the principal at Star Company. Star Company is a cloud accounting firm which offers highly integrated bookkeeping services to small businesses, not-for-profit, and charitable organizations across Canada. She is a certified professional bookkeeper, a Xero advisor, a local Xero ambassador with over 15 years experience developing effective bookkeeping solutions that maximize resources and provide valuable reporting for managers and owners. Beyond all of that great experience and credentials and skill set, she is a wonderful human being. She is the bookkeeper for Jet Propelled. We're very lucky to have her and her team's support. And she has a wealth of experience running fully remote businesses or fully remote business company. And I'm excited to hear what value she brings to the conversation today. Thank you, Sarah.
Thank you. Thanks for having me.
And thank you to everyone for coming out. So I guess maybe we kick things off with one of the first big massive questions to go with speaking. And you can see whoever wants to go first, just jump in. So the first big question was...
Wait. Ryan, just before you get started, just want to let everybody know that we are recording this. So if you don't want to have your picture taken, please remove your camera. So thank you very much. Sorry about that.
No, great reminder. Thank you, Tammy. And then we will be sharing it afterwards as well too. So just for people to catch up on some of the bites of information and interesting topics they can be caught up on afterwards. So the first question is, obviously we're seeing some beginning to emerge as we approach kind of phase and reopening. There's been a lot discussed kind of ahead of time, but what are immediate macro changes most businesses will have to embrace post-COVID? Then a follow-up to that as well, if you want to begin to think about it, is of these immediate changes, which will benefit businesses to sustain long-term? As well as also there's immediate changes, but also what are the long-term changes, do you feel, too? So what's the change?
If I may, I think what we have to think about is categories in which markets and customers are affected. And I think broadly speaking, what we are finding is obviously the categories are biological, economic, psychological, and technology. And the first attention of our entire community, our province, the country as a whole is on the biological, ensuring the safety and health and well-being of all citizens. And that too is a shared responsibility. Related to it is, of course, the mental health and well-being of our citizens. But You have to look at biology and psychology and economy. They're all tied together because it's that well-being that gives consumers the confidence in the future and what the future holds. And of course, we know for a fact that economic activity has come to. So these are the forces that have sort of caused a shift in patterns of business.
Yeah, absolutely. It's funny. I don't think in my entire life I have had the thought of Maslow's hierarchy come to mind as much as I have recently. You know, when everything that is sort of a societal construct around you seems to deteriorate, you know, it's almost a knee-jerk reaction to start thinking about, okay, well, maybe we don't need all these things. What is it that we really need to focus on right now? And then, of course, when you start shifting your mindset in that direction, all of a sudden, you know, major sweeping changes in the economy happen. I know, Sarah, with you, you've got a really great vantage point because you help support a lot of businesses across a broad range of different industries. How have you seen these changes from your standpoint?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I mean, I think the overarching statement to be made about how it will change the future is that we are all affected. So there is nobody who is unaffected by this event, and I think that really brings home important points around planning. So for our clients, there is nobody unaffected, either those in the unfortunate position of having a drop in revenue, having to close their business, having to reshape their business, and then on the other end, there are people who are very positively affected economically or from a business sense by this pandemic. Everybody's affected, and we're all interrelated. So somehow I think this, you know, to the idea of hierarchy of needs, this pandemic has really highlighted that what I do here affects what you do over there, and highlights the importance of business relationships. That how we work together is incredibly important because we're all in it together. And I think the other thing as well is it just highlights the I've heard someone call it the delusion of care, that we can just go about our business and not worry about how it affects other people. It's just not possible. We care about our children, we care about our elders, we care about our neighbors. And so the decisions that we may have made in the past, not thinking about how it affects other people, that may not be possible moving forward. So the shift from just moving with inertia, the things we used to do, the budgets we used to have, the processes we used to have in place, suddenly that's all been thrown in the air, and it really requires short-term thinking and long-term thinking. What do I need to do right now to meet my immediate needs? And then what do I need to try to think ahead to the long term and how to care for myself and also the people around me? It's a lot.
Yeah, it is a lot. Have either of you seen any sort of tangible changes that have taken place that you feel have been changes made with the intent of figuring out a short-term interim solution, but that you see carrying on to be sustainable, really great changes that are going to improve workflow, improve our consideration of how our work impacts other people and that kind of thing. So like, what kinds of changes have you seen in the short term that are then going to go on to really produce a more positive outcome in the future?
Mm-hmm. I can jump in there. I know with our team and in the accounting field in general, there has been a real shift in working with clients and how clients are relating to the work that we do with them. So I think what was true before the pandemic is true in the pandemic, which, you know, all the fundamentals of good financial management, building budgets, managing cash flow, those were already true before. But the pandemic has just highlighted the need for those tools and those kind of relationships with professionals. So for us, we've seen a real shift with our clients, where in the past, maybe some of them who may have not tended to the nuts and bolts of financial management have turned back and are digging in and digging deeper and thinking creatively as well about either how to build their knowledge set or how to think outside the box with their business model. But again, you know, it's not that it wasn't true before the pandemic, it's just that the need and the value of the skill set and the relationship with, whether it's an accountant or an advisor or bookkeeper, whoever it might be, that has real value. We're really seeing people embrace that wholeheartedly.
Well, and kudos to you and the STAR team. You guys have done an exceptional job throughout this of being a constant voice of understanding and of, with Carlene, for example, who's your payroll manager. I mean, she has been 100% on top of every ounce of information that's come out of the government in real time. And you guys have had a weekly COVID-19 sort of review, not just for your clients, but for anybody who is interested in keeping up to date. And, I think that's definitely been a help for me. It's, like you say, a lot of people have, started to take their financial forecasting a little bit more seriously than maybe, things can fall by the wayside when you're in it. Carlene's joining us now. One of the other things that I've seen across the board, I'm not sure if you guys are seeing this as well, is sort of reassessing overhead costs, right? I mean, when you are in it and you're building your business and you're constantly going, I find you have this trailer behind you of things that you bought or signed on for at one point or another that you thought were a real benefit, and going through something like this, really forces you to take stock of, do I really need that $15.99 monthly cost? I can't believe I thought I canceled that thing, a year ago. I'm still paying $300 a year for, that kind of stuff.
One question.
Thing,
Sorry, yeah.
Yeah, sort of just to build off of what Sarah was talking about earlier and Brad alluded to. Yes, it's of critical importance that we, hunker down and take care of our business processes and make sure that all the I's are dotted and T's are crossed. But there is a certain soul searching I have seen that has started emerging in businesses. And I think, there is a pandemic that we were a part of, and there was another reminder of a pandemic that we were ignoring for a long time that emerged in the last 3 weeks. And we are now, in a reality check on both. And business organizations and brands are the smart ones are going back and looking at their value systems and, reevaluating their context, their relationship with the world. What meaning do they bring to the marketplace? And that search for meaning, going back and, using the compass to figure out where you are, which direction you want to head in, who you want to take along, becomes truly important, because I think the future that is going to emerge is a future that is all asking, if not demanding of us, that we be transparent, we be real, we as businesses, even as an economic activity, speak the truth and bear the truth that our customers want to see and hear.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. Now, I don't want to take things too off course from a business focus, but I think it's incumbent upon us to talk about this a little bit. You brought up the fact that with this pandemic having hit, people are taking stock of, and I don't think it's necessarily just what their customers want to see from them, but they're also looking inward at, what do I want to see from my company? What do I want to see from myself? What do my staff want to see from me? What do they want to be a part of?
Hello.
Oh, I think it would be interesting to know, if we would be in position with race relations and Black Lives Matter movement, for example, if we would be in the same situation had this pandemic not happened. And what I mean by that is, if we had another instance, because there have been instances throughout history, you know, obviously a tremendous number of instances throughout history where we have seen this inequality and mistreatment of everybody in the world, you know, particularly marginalized people. And I think that with COVID having happened, with COVID having happened and us taking stock of what's important to us, I almost feel like that has provided a positive influence on making some progress and potential real change with everything that's been going on in the last 3 weeks as well.
Yes, I mean, sorry, Sarah, to jump in. I think the soul searching that individuals, communities, businesses are doing, how we are all stepping up and educating ourselves and reflecting on our choices is speaking to the nature of the business business entity we want to have in our future. It's you know, it's speaking to the value systems that we desire from businesses. And businesses are truly, you know, telling us if they are going to invest in, take ownership, and bring about that change that is much needed.
Mm-hmm.
Absolutely. Ryan, do you want to?
Yeah, I lost it there. Sorry.
No, that's okay. Yeah, we're getting some meeting interference.
Yeah, I think the link must have gotten out there. So we're gonna just make sure if it's not a name we don't recognize from the invite list, that no admission.
Awesome.
All right, just a suggestion: don't post your links on the internet, or
yeah,
a lot of bombers are gonna come.
Yeah,
like me. All right, peace, y'all.
That's it. Yeah.
All right. This is a new normal.
Yeah.
Yeah, exactly.
So, you know, it's funny, but this is,
yeah, another suggestion. Yeah, don't post your links on Twitter. Don't do that. I'm eating pickles right now. So if you guys would like to join me, I'm eating pickles.
Shut the fuck up.
Oh, God.
So we're learning.
We had like 20 people in the waiting room, so I was like, oh, maybe I'm like, no, I don't know if all of these. So I've been actively removing them. Sorry about that, guys. I've blocked the meeting.
But you know what's funny about that, though, is that this is, you know, a real-time, real-life example of the new world that we're living in right now. So we are using support services, you know, in order to be able to interact virtually and safely and still make progress and have important discussions with people. You know, and as we do that, this being one of many tools that we're going to use going forward, you know, we're starting to learn the different ways that we're going to be challenged by these tools, right? So, you know, live case in point, you know, so this is something that, you know, as a result of having experienced that in this meeting, you know, that's something that we're going to be able to research and look into and find workarounds to make sure that stuff like that, you know, we're able to manage that more effectively in future.
And with that said, so before moving on to the next question, the one question kind of lasting from the first one that we had too is there's sort of a dichotomy between obviously the physical distancing, which has been a kind of a prominent habit or behavior, I guess, established across the past few months and will be for the foreseeable future, but also the much more sort of interpersonal nature of also that I think, you know, spending time at home and spending time with loved ones, missing other loved ones. There's sort of this duality of you can't be physically close to people, but there's a greater, I think, realization or value placed on being close to people in some way, shape, or form, and that sort of realization. And and I guess, I mean, obviously we don't know, necessarily when a vaccine will be produced, but physical distancing, I think, is a part of a new normal, at least for a shorter period. But which do you think has that sort of staying power that will be influencing behaviors and trends in businesses going forward? And I know before I got booted out there, I think my computer timed out, Mandeep, you were beginning to touch on it with sort of a soul kind of missing from a lot of businesses, and that sort of personal touch point or more personalization. So I guess, yeah, the question between physical distancing and greater connection establishing, which one do you think will be the more lasting?
I think, whether it's the short term or the long term, businesses have to almost immediately think about, what's my relationship equity that I have with my marketplace, whether it's with my supply chain, whether it's with my customers who are loyal to me, customers who are doing the occasional transaction. And that evaluation of that relationship equity will reveal to us where we are lacking. And that's what good businesses will invest in. Even when we talk about safety, businesses have to look at safety from the perspective of a customer, from the perspective of an employee, from the perspective of other stakeholders. And they have to invest in safety to be able to create a customer experience such that that customer is willing to spend even though they feel insecure about their financial future, and such that they are willing to come back and give share of wallet to us as a business. Mm-hmm. So evaluation of the strength of relationships and investing in making those relationships stronger with employees, with supply chain, with customers will be critical.
More to that point, what have you seen an industry or business type in particular that has done a really great job of leveraging that connection with their customers and the equity that they've built up?
I think we've started seeing some change in how brands are talking, but I don't know if I have evidence that I can speak to in terms of actions. But there are good gestures out there, interesting gestures like Kraft giving up their advertising space to small businesses in the GTA and saying, hey, you go ahead, promote your product, your service, because what's more important right now is that you should be able to sustain yourself through this upheaval. And sure, we've invested in media buying, but this media purchase is now yours, and you should use it to grow and sustain yourself and ride out this rough patch. So those good gestures are coming into play, but other tangible actions, I think time will tell.
I think I certainly don't have any evidence to support this, but from a narrative standpoint, I feel like a lot of the equity that has been built up in community organizations like gathering places like restaurants and coffee shops and things like that, I think, certainly they were one of the hardest hit industries right away because of social distancing. However, I feel like they almost garnered the most amount of sort of rallying attention from the community. I keep sort of fixating on the hospitality industry with regards to this because, they were sort of put to the fire immediately and immediately started coming up with innovative, interesting ways to overcome everything that they were challenged with at the time. And I feel like a lot of other businesses, that were also impacted, the impact was a little bit more of a slower rollout than restaurants were, day one, that's it, you're done, you got to figure stuff out. Whereas other restaurants like, our agency, for example, it took a little bit to start to really feel the squeeze, so we weren't as necessarily hastily or rapidly motivated to figure out that solution. But looking to those industries that were really rapidly put in that position, I feel like we can learn a lot from the necessity of overcoming that and how they did that.
Mm-hmm.
Sorry, guys, I got to take this call.
I think one of the things that I've appreciated, I've seen it with our clients and also with our vendors and in the community in general, is that those businesses and organizations that are incredibly transparent about what's going on, it builds a huge amount of credibility and trust. So they're not afraid to say, we're not sure what we're doing. They're not afraid to say, we're not sure how this is going to go. They're not afraid to reach out and say, what can I do for you as as a vendor, as a customer, whatever the case may be. It seems to me that those are the people who are, it's a cliche term, but they're really leaning in and saying, what's going on? How do we find our way through this? But I certainly appreciate the transparency, and I find it easy to engage with.
Yeah, I think that's a great message. I mean, I think a lot of businesses in particular, because businesses tend to be in a position of reference or in some circumstances authority, right? So to not have an answer to something feels like a weakness. But I think that one thing that, if we hadn't learned previous to this, one thing that we're learning throughout this is that if you don't have the answer to something, one of the strongest positions that you can take is to reach out for answers and say, we really don't know what's going on. That's, certainly going to build your credibility. You're not going to be, speaking from a position of, not knowing or lack of knowledge and, potentially risking damage to that relationship or that line of communication.
Mm-hmm. I think one of the questions, going back to a list that we had kind of looked at, was the necessity one, Brad. I don't know if you want to ask that. I think that was one of yours.
You know what? Just before that, I wanted to touch on workflow processes.
Sure. Yeah.
And I'm gonna pose this question to Sarah first, if you don't mind.
Sure.
And Mandeep, I'd love to hear your thoughts on this as well. But just with Sarah in particular, you have how many years have you been in business now?
I think closing in on 11.
11 years. Congratulations. That's a huge accomplishment. So, and for how long of that period of time have you operated remotely with your team?
7.
7 years. So one of the reasons why we were really excited to have you on this panel today is because you have such a wealth of experience running a remote organization completely remotely for so long. I'm wondering obviously you've spent a tremendous amount of time honing in on the infrastructure and the support services and everything that you need to be able to not just run your business, but to be able to support the businesses that you work for. Can you talk a little bit about different workflow processes that maybe you've already had in play that came in really handy when everything changed? And maybe is there anything that's happened since then that has had you dial into something new as well?
So our move to the cloud corresponded with the accounting move to the cloud. So the tools that have become available have just gotten better and better and better over the last 7 years. So it's all about gathering data and putting it in the right spot. And there's just about 20,000 different tools for 20,000 different industries that one can apply. I don't know if you're looking for actual specifics, but there's just an endless list of tools for our industry, and I'm sure for other industries as well. I think the challenge in making that leap into the cloud accounting space for us, and I'm sure it's similar in other industries, is figuring out what fits for you. So each organization, each business is going to have its own peculiarities, and it takes a bit of time and a bit of commitment to figure out what works for that particular situation. And I think that can often be overwhelming and intimidating for people, so they don't even do it to begin with. Everyone's been thrust into the new normal now, so they've had to kind of find out, do I want to use Zoom or do I want to use Google Hangouts? Like, those are the questions that most people have been asking. I think the big learning over the past 7 years is there's no right answer. So it really is about trying it out and figuring out what's the best thing for you at this moment, and not being afraid to change it if you discover something else down the road. But that what's right for one organization might not be right for the other. It's just about trying it out and finding out. So there's the trial and error. And then I think the other piece that's really important is understanding that it's limitations. So the cloud is amazing, especially for the kind of work we do. It's incredibly efficient, saves tons of time, turns out fantastic data and reports. But it's not people, and you can't replace people. And there's nothing that replaces the one-on-one. Helping people find their way in whatever industry you're in. I think that it's okay to move to the technology as long as we keep the person relationship going and finding what works best for that particular person. So just knowing that, and I think for me, where I've struggled as an owner manager is in culture building within my organization, that there's nothing like you're mentioning going out for drinks or having a drink night. You just can't do that when you're a remote team. So you really have to put an effort to find ways to build culture and community when you're remote, and that's challenging.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So the two main takeaways that I get from you there, the first one spoke to me immediately, because with regards to there not being a specific right answer for everybody as far as the tools that you're going to use to be able to build your remote infrastructure. And honestly, that little tidbit there, if I had heard that maybe 3 years ago, I would have saved myself a whole lot of time and heartache, because every time I was trying to adopt a new technology, I was going through thinking, well, this is the thing that works for Google. It has to work for me. If it's not working for me, then I need to change me, and then there's something broken on my side of things. And so you keep trying to sort of force a square peg through a round hole. But just having the understanding that there are a tremendous number of tools out there. There isn't a right tool. Try different things quickly and try to identify whether or not it has any kind of staying power or viability to it as quickly as you can. And if not, get out. And we tried all kinds of different communications and project management and Basecamp and project manager and all kinds of things until we figured out what worked for us. But I spent way too much time thinking that I was the problem with the software.
Right. Yeah.
The
app self-esteem.
Yeah, exactly. I think that's a really great point. And then your other point, one of the ways that you can make a remote business work is by going above and beyond and doing things that are going to make those more intimate personal connections with not just with your staff, but with the people that you support in your community as well. And you guys do a great job of that as well. You host conferences as a Zero ambassador. I know you do that. You appreciate clients with physical gifting, and that's a physical, tangible, tactile touch point. And you give back to the community and you do things, together, even if, your team members are apart. Like, for example, last year when you participated in our 5 days for good,
right.
you guys were, you guys have a focus on sustainable environmental efforts, whereas Jet Propelled is more, we have more focus on social causes. And you can't do everything, right?
Right.
You got to do your best with what you can. And, when you guys participated, true to the values of your organization, everybody did something to give back and support sustainability and support the environment in one way or another. And that, even if you were doing it independently, you were sharing your experiences with each other, and you're still, having that FaceTime and more of that personal interaction with your staff and with your clients.
So,
great points.
Wondering, Mandeep, would you like the question again, or do you have thoughts in mind? Or
no, I think Sarah and Brad have shed good light on the issue. What has to probably be kept in mind is that, you know, as small business owners or medium-sized business owners, we are creatures of habit, and we have to go back and review our habits and patterns by which we operate the business, and second guess ourselves and disrupt those, right? Because what we were used to doing is not feasible anymore. And it's only when we question our patterns of behavior, our past choices, our workflows, do we look for new ways of accomplishing the same task using another means.
Yeah.
And I feel like it's important, you know, that's a very important point to keep in mind. And I think it's critical that we look at that from a position of excitement, you know. I mean, a lot of what's going on right now, you know, people are looking at, oh, now I have to figure this out and this doesn't work anymore, and how am I going to fix this and that kind of thing. You know, I think it's important to approach this from a perspective of, you know, an opportunity to rewrite your blueprint. So, you know, you have carte blanche. You know, we get to refigure this out in a way that gets to leverage our past experience, right? See what was working, see what wasn't working, and then be able to move forward and say, okay, I don't want to work the way that I used to work because, you know, XYZ didn't work for me. The hours were too long. I was too disconnected from, you know, my family, or, you know, I didn't do enough in the community, or, you know, whatever it was that you didn't like about it in the past. You get to rewrite the whole thing right now. And not just because you're prompted to do so, but also because your audience is now primed for changes, right? So you can make a significant change to the way that you operate and the way that you manage your day-to-day in your business. And none of your clients, none of your affiliates, none of your vendors, you know, none of your staff are going to say, well, why are we doing this? You know, everybody's going to be expecting these changes right now. So they're already primed for it. So you're not going to hit any kind of barriers that you may have prior to all of this. Yeah.
I think, well, Tammy, you have a question there that I think is interesting. I want to come back to the innovation one. So touching on basically what Brad was just going with, kind of opportunities open right now. But we do have 15 minutes left, so I want to make sure we do get some of our audience questions in. Tammy, I don't know if you want to maybe ask your question personally, or if you want us to read it out, but I'm sure I'm fine with just saying it.
I wanted to ask Sarah, both from a practical perspective, because now with your team has been remote for 7 years, how did you create corporate culture? But then taking on to that, I'd like to ask Professor Malik, from an academic perspective, as small businesses are pivoting, what's the best way or what can you think about in terms of a corporate culture? Because now we don't have water cooler talk anymore. We don't have that. So perhaps from that small business perspective and as well from an academic perspective, I'd like both of you to answer that question.
I think I had a business advisor several years ago who said to me, you have to talk to people. And it sounds so obvious, but when you're in a remote environment, it's very easy to go through your day without having time to talk, to have a little chat about something. So it really just, in my experience over the last few years, it requires scheduling time to not work and have a chat, and that is one-on-one as well as a group. The challenge, of course, is that there are some people who aren't comfortable. If it was a team meeting like this where everyone's on the Zoom call, there are always going to be people who are less comfortable speaking up. One great idea that I heard that we actually have just implemented in our team is to do sharing time. And you can call it whatever you want. So it's not, maybe it doesn't have that word, it has a better, more catchy word, but giving people an opportunity to talk and share something about themselves in the group setting. So it just builds that trust, it builds that understanding, because otherwise there is no water cooler. You don't pass each other in the hallway. There's no casual conversation. It really, really has to be scheduled. Sort of like couples, they have to schedule romantic time together. You have to do the same thing with your team to build the love and trust.
Nice. I like that.
Shall I pick up where Sarah left off, Tammy? Okay,
yes,
well,
that would be great.
you know, these are words that are becoming more used, commonly understood, but I think culture is about shared values. And what you really need to determine as a business and as a business team is what are the values that you want to exhibit and who buys into those values and on what basis. I think transparency becomes most critical because soon as there is distance, there emerges this issue of, you know, do I really know the people I'm working with? Can I trust them? Are they even listening to me? Do they understand me? Right? It's not the same. You know, the body language is not there. The handshakes and the hugs are not there. So the warmth disappears. And you have to think about, how do I establish it? And the only way to do it is by using transparency as a starting point. And then the second issue that Sarah was referencing was, you know, getting to know people. Do we really know people and what makes them tick? What are their intrinsic motivations? And do we relate to them at those levels? Or, you know, are we creating environments in which people can put on masks, come about, share time and leave, and then switch their masks as they go into their personal lives? So, you know, knowledge is power. How do you keep that knowledge, or do you share it? You know, do you empower people by sharing knowledge, or do you, you know, keep knowledge away from them and make them fear what you know and what they don't know, right? So it has to be thought about to a great extent on the design of families, right? It has to be thought about in a way philosophically, and those social values that make the fabric of families strong have to bear upon the culture of organizations and businesses.
Mm-hmm.
I just add something to that, because I think there's a really good point there. That as leaders, we're responsible for setting the framework for what corporate culture online looks like. So just to add to that, just like with a family, there's no right or wrong. So for some families, sitting down at the dinner table every night is absolutely essential, and for others, that's not where they have their family time. They have their family time, you know, playing ball after dinner, and that's totally fine. That's completely acceptable. I think it's the same for online culture. So especially, not entirely always, but if you have younger team members, identifying that when you have a team meeting, everybody has their camera on, that you've muted your phone or muted your volume, that you don't have your phone next to you. Sometimes those incredibly basic rules, and whatever they may be for your particular organization, are essential to identify so that everybody's on the same page.
I wonder if, just a thought, I wonder if, you know, you were talking about having settings in different areas for different types of activities and different types of engagement. You know, and social media is very much like that. I mean, we have our professional business engagement on LinkedIn. You know, we have our family friendly social engagement on Twitter, and then there are a host of other social platforms that, you know, go down the rabbit hole, and, you know, you find different parts of people's personalities through that. I almost wonder if it would be worthwhile to have different virtual protocols set up for different situations and different types of engagements. So say, for example, you know, we have, you know, certain community get-togethers where we have drinks and blow off steam and just like see how everybody's doing and make sure that we can connect. But maybe, you know, that's something that we should be doing on Google Hangouts, you know, and our professional interaction is on Zoom, you know, and that little sort of difference in how our communication model is set up, you know, maybe that sets the tone. So, you know, when you have the interface and the interaction of Google Hangouts, it's all right, you're sitting back and, you know, you have a drink or coffee in hand or whatever, you're a lot more relaxed and you're allowed to speak freely. And, you know, the framework has been set up for this to be a connection zone, you know, not a get work done zone. Yeah.
So I think, so Tammy's ticking off. So we're at 1:52. So we can continue on a little bit afterwards. I've got to jump back to Niagara, I know, in a bit, and we did plan for an hour. And thank you very much, Sarah and Mandeep, for coming. Just maybe want to get in that necessity and an innovation question beforehand too. So the intent of this one being the first one was to be kind of a bit more macro, or just about kind of business and trends and behaviors in general. So I think we would be remiss to not ask kind of this almost painfully generic but absolutely necessary question. So necessity being the mother of invention, we have seen a lot of innovation from certain industries who have needed to adapt to an ever-changing business landscape. What are the most effective innovations you've seen from different industries, and how do you think they can be applied to businesses going forward?
I mean, dare I say, you know, there's nothing that jumps out at me as a substantive innovation that will be sustainable in the foreseeable future. What is emerging are some really interesting collaborations, though. I was chatting with somebody from Reckitt Benckiser a few weeks back, and they are now in collaboration for their Lysol brand with hotels and airlines, where if you were to go to a hotel room, then that hotel room after cleaning has a security sticker on it as being Lysol certified. So there are some of those collaborations that are emerging that did not exist before. I know there's a collaboration announced late yesterday or this morning between Shopify and Walmart, you know, two very significant giants in the e-commerce and retail space. So that to me is boding well for the future, that brands and organizations are turning to collaborators and using an interdependency model to gain credibility and to regain lost trust, or to regain the missing link that customers are looking for before they make a commitment to that particular business.
Right.
I think that you know, you started that great point off by saying that there wasn't any specific innovation that jumps out at you, but I think you know, revisiting collaboration in a new space in and of itself is innovative. You know, so I think that is a really great insight, and we've seen that historically work really well in the marketing space. You know, in particular, where you find, you know, different brands that team up together to provide a unique stopping point, you know, in advertising or in some kind of campaigning or branding. Yeah, I think that's great. And we and going back to the hospitality industry again, you know, we've seen local restaurants team up with purveyors of baked goods, you know. Like locally, we've seen, you know, Caro team up with Bitten, you know, for example, and I think
Motion and jet propelled,
right? Yeah. Yeah. So I mean, I think that's you know, collaborations. I think is a really great takeaway from that, and I think that there are a lot of businesses that could be looking inward, looking at their business model, looking at what they have to offer, and then, you know, looking outward to see, you know, who's a business out there that might be able to put a unique spin on what we do or how we offer things to our clients. Sarah, do you have anything to add to that point?
Yeah, I think we see our clients doing the same thing that you're talking about, which is oddly enough, rather than extending the area of focus, bring it inward. What do we do really well, and who else can benefit from that? So not adding on to service, not additional lines of revenue, just taking what you're really, really good at and seeing who else can benefit from it, whether it's through collaboration or finding a new market with a small tweak. Those seem to be really beneficial moves as opposed to any kind of big grand plan.
Yeah.
Great. Well, I think, I mean, we've seen a couple people go. Unless there's any further questions, I could say thank you very much to Sarah and Mandeep.
Thank you so much. Yeah.
I think Brad and I are going to talk about how we're going to continue this forward and on what sort of interval. But if you did like it, stay tuned and to both our social media channels for future announcements. Brad, do you have anything to add there?
No, again, I just wanted to echo that sentiment. Thank you very much, Mandeep. This is my first time meeting you, and it was an absolute pleasure. And I appreciate the insights that you were able to bring to the conversation. And again, thank you, Sarah. We've been working together for a couple years now, and I have a tremendous amount of respect for you and appreciation for you and what you've done with your team and what you do to support your clients and what you do to support your environmental focus as well. And I really appreciate the insights that you had in the call today. I'm thankful, grateful that you were able to make it.
Thanks so much for having me. It was nice to meet you, Mandeep.
Nice to meet you as well, Sarah.
Awesome.
Good. All right. Well, thank you very much, everyone, for coming out. And we'll
see you next time.
Okay.
Yeah.
Have a great day.
See ya.